Thank you. This $25,000 contribution for this 2021 conference, will that be covered by the CAPG or we have to shell that out?
That would be out of the board's budget.
But it says that if you see page 3, it is saying that they are requesting 25,000 contribution, but it will be paid for everything from its budget.
So we make the contribution of $25,000 and they cover all the bills. So we give them the money and then they'll administer and pay for everything else.
So ultimately there is no cost to us.
Beyond the commitment of the $25,000 plus the hosting of the kickoff breakfast in 2020. That's also outlined in the report.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. The next item is so that's carried, right? Thank you. The next item is the Ottawa Police Gala fundraiser in support of the Snowsuit Fund and Operation Come Home. That the Ottawa Police Services Board approve the purchase of a table at the 10th Annual Ottawa Police Gala being held on November the 9th, 2019 at the Shaw Centre at a cost of $1,750. Is this carried? Thank you. The next item is the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards Labour Relations Seminar Funding Request. That the Ottawa Police Services Board approve $1,500 gold sponsorship for the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards 2019 Labour Relations Seminar being held in Mississauga from the 10th to 11th of October 2019. Is this item carried? Thank you. On the next item, I'll be leaving the room, and I'll turn the mic over to Member Valiquet to deal with item number 6.
All right, so item number 6 is 19 Fairmont lease extension. That the Ottawa Police Services Board approve a lease extension with Beldemere Holdings Limited for approximately 28,749 square feet of space located at 19 Fairmont Avenue for a period of 5 years, commencing November 1st, 2019 and ending October 31st, 2024. The total consideration for the lease extension is $4,341,099 plus HST. Is this item carried? Carried? Thank you.
We're now on item number 7, the reappointment of Special Constable for the OC Transpo. That the Ottawa Police Services Board approve the reappointment of OC Transpo employee Chris Andre Momi as Special Constable pursuant to Section 53 of the Police Services Act, in accordance with the terms and conditions set forth in the attached approval of appointment form. Is this carried? It's Charles. Sorry? It's Charles. Oh. The next item is the Workforce Management Report, second quarter 2019. That the Ottawa Police Services Board approve the appointment of the sworn officers identified in document 2. Is that carried? And then receive this report for information. Is it received? Thank you. Modernization Roadmap Update. That the Ottawa Police Services Board receive this report for information. Is that report received? Thank you. Interoperable Mobile Communications Managed Service. That the Ottawa Police Services Board receive this report for information. Is it received? Thank you. Financial status report for the second quarter of 2019. That the Ottawa Police Services Board receive this report for information. Is the item received? Thank you. The Public Consultation Policy Annual Report. That the Ottawa Police Services Board receive this report for information. Is this received? Thank you. Performance Report, second quarter 2019. That the Ottawa Police Services Board receive this report for information. Is it received? Thank you. Report on the SIU investigation, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is it received? Thank you. Report on the SIU investigation, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is it received? Thank you. Number 16, outstanding board inquiries and motions, September 2019, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is the item received? Thank you. Letters of commendation, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is the item received? Thank you. So now we'll go back to the held items, the first of which was the Chief's verbal report. Could I ask Chief to...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as you indicated, it was with great sadness today that we learned of the health challenges that Board Chair Diane Deans is facing right now. On behalf of the OPS, we'd like to wish her great strength as she goes through this. Having had the opportunity and pleasure to work with her closely for the last 6 months, what we do know is she's a very strong person, she's a fighter, and we have all the confidence in the world that she will be able to get through this. We wish her great strength through this time, and we can't wait till she's back working with us again in the very near future. I want to personally thank her for all the support that she's provided me as interim chief over the last number of months. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the entire board. Tonight is my last meeting as interim chief before Chief Select Slowly comes in next month. And I want to let you know, I think it was a great privilege and honor to actually lead this police service for the period of time that I did. And a responsibility that I have enjoyed and one I have not taken lightly. I'm actually quite proud of what we've accomplished over the last number of months together as a board and as an organization. We made a strong commitment to community policing, and we've started to increase our presence within neighborhoods that we've identified where we're going to enter into in the near future. Tonight you'll see a presentation around that where we'll be able to flesh out more information on exactly what that will look like moving ahead. Our Byward Market initiative, after a rocky start to the summer, saw boots on the ground actually creating community safety and the perception within the community of a safer Byward Market that has actually taken on an approach of decreasing crime and social disorder issues in that area, which we know is one of the jewels of our city, a key tourist destination. We revamped the Bikes and Beats unit, and we actually had them in a more targeted way in areas that needed them. And we've seen the positive impacts that they've had, and beyond that, we've heard from our community how pleased they are with their presence in the areas where they spend the majority of their time. All these things are around community policing and how we engage with our community on a daily basis. I can tell you that's one of the main reasons I joined this job, was to be engaged in that positive engagement and spending time with our community to make this a safer place. What we know, what we see every day, is the strength of our service is actually because of the 2,000 fantastic members that we have delivering service on a daily basis. We go through on a monthly basis our commendation report, and it comes through, and usually it's accepted. Sure, it's well read, but I also think it's really important that we take time to recognize some of the great work that our members do. We have hundreds of thousands of interactions a year, and I'll tell you, many of those on a monthly basis we receive positive input over. The members that provide service to us are actually the strength of what we do and the strength of who we are as a policing service. Couple examples from this month's commendation report is about a worried mother who called our communications center to indicate that her daughter was lost and she didn't know where she was, and had the support of our communications staff to work through that problem and ultimately have that daughter return home. That mother took time to send us a message saying that had it not been for that positive interaction, that night could have turned out differently, and her perception of the police could have been much different. We also received a letter from an anonymous person, an anonymous passerby who had nothing to do with an incident that watched two of our officers engaged with a person in a mental health incident, in a mental health crisis. And the passerby commented on the professionalism and the kindness of the officers as they dealt with that. That is remarkable, but it's also the standard that our own officers set for themselves in terms of dealing with people who are in these crises on an ongoing basis, and we know that it generates many of our calls. We read in the last couple of weeks about Constable Geneviève Bolduc and Lisa Bocage, who went to help a mother who was at wit's end with a severely disabled child. Not only did they help that mother through that scenario, they cut her lawn after, and they did whatever they could to try and help that mother see the light at the end of that really bad situation. These are a couple stories. We fortunately receive hundreds of these stories on a monthly basis. We can only put so many forward to you, but I think it's important that regularly we take time to have these discussions to actually recognize the fantastic work that our women and men do on an ongoing basis. It always amazes me the depth of kindness and professionalism that our members show on almost every single call that they attend. When people call us, it's not their best day. Actually, it's probably one of their worst days, and I know that most of our officers attend every single time to actually help and make that day better for that person who's called us in distress. Like I indicated earlier on, this is my last verbal report as your interim chief. I thank you for the privilege and honor of being able to serve as your interim chief. And most importantly, I thank the membership of the Ottawa Police Service to give me the opportunity to lead them and move us ahead as I think we have over the last couple months. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I guess in reply, I'd certainly like to say on behalf of the board how much we appreciate your the role that you've played and your professionalism and dedication that you've shown. It really means a lot to us, and I think it means a lot to the city. So thank you very much for your involvement. I have a question, but before I do, is there anyone else that has a question they'd like to follow up with the interim chief on?
Thank you. When you talked about the Byward Market, I'm just curious, is this what you're doing now, is this part of the new pilot project on community policing? Is that one of the target areas, or is this over and above what you've been doing on a day-to-day basis?
So this is a specific response to a specific need within the Byward Market. You'll remember at the beginning of the year we had several incidents of violence there. There was much social disorder, particularly as bars let out, that created fear within that area. We immediately responded to that and put more resources in there, starting in the nighttime hours, but we pretty early on actually adapted that to be all day during peak times, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. That work that we did was a specific response to an issue in that area and is over and above the neighborhood-based policing units that we're putting out.
Thank you. Were there any other? Yes, Member Meenan? Yeah.
Thank you. Deputy Chief, just I guess in the last month we've had, it was a pretty big bust in Riverside South. There were guns and drugs. And do you know at this point, maybe this is unfair, but when you confiscate guns at a crime scene, are the majority of them legal, illegal? Do you know where they're coming from? Like at this point, I'm just curious about this latest incident.
So I can't speak specifically to that case because it's still before the courts. What we do in that case is we will do a complete history on those firearms. That will be evidence that will be presented as part of the court case. But as the board knows, we're currently engaged with the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police on a special task force relating to guns and gun crime. And one of the things that we're trying to ascertain is how do we best identify the problem of legal versus illegal guns that exist on our street. That will be part of the work that we'll be bringing back to this board in January when we will hopefully have more definitive answers for you.
Okay. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you, though, for coming out to my ward in the summertime with a number of your colleagues to talk to the residents about crime. It was much appreciated, and people are still talking about it, so thank you so much. They are really looking forward to having community or neighborhood policing back with a vengeance, so thank you.
We're happy. It was actually a very innovative idea. I thought it was a great format that I would like to see replicated more in different wards. And we're also very, very eager and really looking forward to having our neighborhood-based policing teams.
Thank you, Member. Well, I had a question, and it's with respect to ALPRs, which for those in the audience who may not be familiar with it, are automated license plate readers. And My question is, given concerns about, well, I think we all share some concerns about privacy and surveillance and that sort of thing, and I think I understand in the past that any data we gather from these ALPRs is only held very briefly and then it's destroyed. My question is with respect to, as I learned recently, that the CBSA, the system used by CBSA and the American border, which is the same automated license plate reader, has been hacked and the information has been compromised. And this has led to an investigation by the Privacy Commissioner into this hacking and what's happening with the information. And I just wondered if you could tell us if that's a concern with the Ottawa system, the system used by the Ottawa Police, and if we should be expecting to hear something more about this.
I'm having problems with my mic tonight. We also share the concerns around privacy, absolutely. We've repeatedly come to the board and had open discussions about privacy and to make sure that the data we maintain is protected the best way we can. The specific scenario you're referring to around CBSA is with a different IT support system than the one we use, and the hack or the data release was specifically around that system that they use. Because we don't use it, we don't have the same risk or the same profile as they do, and we don't feel that we have at this point any data challenges with the information we maintain.
Okay, so you can confirm us that you will keep an eye on this, and if there's, to ensure that our system is robust in terms of security, because we certainly wouldn't want to find out somebody's been looking in on what's going on and where it's going on. Thank you very much for that. Okay, the next item on our agenda, is this report received, the chief's verbal report received? Thank you. Thank you. The next item is a presentation on the neighborhood policing pilot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So as our folks set up, as we went through the business planning process and business planning cycle, we talked a great deal about our neighborhood-based policing and community-based policing as we were starting to reestablish those teams within neighborhoods. The board requested at that point that we come with more information. And tonight, we're actually very happy to have for you the information about what our neighborhood-based policing teams will look like and the timeline we have to actually establish those. So with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Rob Drummond to introduce his team and kick off the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. So tonight we're going to be doing the presentation on the new neighborhood policing project.
Ken Bryden.
Sorry, I thought she was waving at us.
Oh, sorry.
So we have Ken Bryden will be doing the presentation. He's the project lead. Also assisting him will be Wayne Stangl, who has been doing the architectural work on the project. See if we're good to go, Chris? Okay. And I'll leave it to Kenny to start here.
Good afternoon, board members. I first want to start by acknowledging the work that two people have done and have been pivotal as to where this project is now, this pilot is now, and that is our project manager, Nadine Byrne. She could not be here this evening. And this beauty next to me here, Sergeant Wayne Stangl, the heavy lifting that these folks have done for this pilot has been crucial, so I just want to acknowledge that work. Folks, I'm excited to update you on the October launch of our neighborhood policing project. The decision to collapse the previous NHO role has created a gap in our service delivery at the neighborhood level. We have listened to and we continue to listen to, thank you, residents, business owners, community groups, community associations, councillors, our peers, anyone that wanted and needed to be a part of that conversation. We have listened to them. They've all said loud and clear that the police-community relationships and that quick, nimble response that is so much needed, so greatly needed in responding to neighborhood-based crimes and social disorders has been impacted. We acknowledge that and we appreciate that and are making changes in how we approach neighborhood-based policing, community policing. The development and deployment of neighborhood resource teams is a big part of that change. Our main objective here is to establish a neighborhood policing program where we have cops working with residents on a daily, consistent basis in the neighborhoods, in those communities, identifying community-based problems, identifying social disorders that are unique to those communities. Gradually, we hope to introduce these teams into other sectors across the city as new budgets are approved. Folks, I understand this is a busy slide here, but it does, and hopefully does demonstrate just how busy we have been in, and continue to be, in listening to the public over the last 10 months, to be specific, and on our new approach to neighborhood-based policing, community policing. In these conversations, we have identified what has worked well in the past with our neighborhood roles, what didn't work so well, excuse me, what activities these residents would like to see going forward with the new program, what activities they don't necessarily want to see as we go forward. But we've had these conversations both internally and externally with all of the key stakeholders that is forming our approach with this program. So we will be deploying 3 neighborhood resource teams. They will be piloted in what's known to us in the OPS world as Sector 25, which is our Vanier and Overbrook communities. Sector 34 to the south of our city in our communities surrounding Herringate and the South End proper, as well as Sector 21 just to the west for our Carlington and Caldwell areas. Ladies and gentlemen, these areas were selected based on statistics that are associated with calls for service, and particularly volumes of calls for service. The rates of violence, violent crimes, particularly stabbings, shootings, and homicides, as well as the rates of property crimes. Each of these neighborhoods have experienced elevated rates, folks, that exceed and sometimes double the rates of other sectors across the city. Each of these teams will be comprised of 8 officers and 1 sergeant overseeing that team, supervising the activities of that team. 5 of those officers were just recently selected as new neighborhood officers coming in. A community police officer, school resource officer, and a traffic officer who are already sectorially deployed in these neighborhoods. But what I want to draw your attention to and highlight is that 5-year fixed term piece, which I think is crucial. We've heard loud and clear through the many conversations and different messaging that we've had with the public, with our peers and everybody that I spoke about, that it was pretty crystal clear that we need the same faces, we need the same voices, we need the same contact and relationships in those officers with the residents. This 5-year fixed term piece will ensure that we have that consistency, we have that familiar voice, that familiar face that will be working in these neighborhoods. These officers will be receiving neighborhood-specific training, including cultural training, which is unique to these neighborhoods that we have selected. And it will be to further increase officer awareness in these areas that these officers will be working, deployed, and communicating with residents. Just some of the team activities and responsibilities. Again, that regular, consistent police resident contact. Communications that are paramount to have at the front end when we identify or the community identifies a problematic address or a community-based issue. Prevention and intervention will be the mindset going into these neighborhoods as we leave the gate, so to speak, where we recognize that it's crucial to have those important conversations at the front end, identifying those low-level, street-level based crimes, and nipping them in the bud as quickly as possible on that front end. And if that's making connections with city services, if that's making connections with the various social services, or simply having the police involvement that's needed, that's what we will do. Enforcement and suppression is clearly a valuable and important piece as well to this conversation. These police officers will arrest bad people for doing bad things in the neighborhood when required and when needed. This is all backed up, of course, by our frontline personnel and our patrol officers and our investigative sections, just as it is today. These officers will work towards long-term solutions to public safety and those specific community-based issues that are identified to them. Again, hopefully and primarily at the front end before they have a chance to spiral. Dispute resolution, working with vulnerable groups. All of this, this framework is built and needs to be built on meaningful and lasting relationships with the residents. And these officers will have the time and the capacity to do that and to build on those. Folks, I think we would all agree that neighborhood-based policing, community policing, has a strong and a positive impact in our communities and the residents that live in those communities. One of the reasons neighborhood policing did take a hit with us over the last couple of years was because we weren't able to effectively demonstrate the value that it did have and demonstrate the impact that it does have with our residents. That is why we have engaged Dr. Linda Duxbury and a fairly large academic team to conduct an independent evaluation and an assessment of the work that's going to be done through this program. The information collected from this assessment, I hope, will inform the evolution of this program, as I said, to further sectors across the city as the appropriate approvals are reached. There are a number of key activities that are included in the assessment as are listed there: public surveys, pulse checks, very much the academic world and outside mine. But what is clear is that we will have a final report, and we will be presenting whatever findings we do have to the board whenever that report is made available to us. Folks, at this point, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. That was a great report, and I can tell you that as part of the outreach that we did and to do the strategic plan, your comment, create meaningful and lasting relationships with residents, really resonates, because that was a message we heard really loud and clear at every meeting that we were at. The community wants somebody that they know who's going to be there and creates a relationship. I believe Councillor Eglay, or Member Eglay, you have a question. Member Valaket, Member Meehan, Member Neerman.
Thank you. I just want to follow up a little bit on a brief discussion that I had with Interim Chief Bell. I think this is great. I think that we needed to change our policing model. I'm not sure we've gone far enough in that regard, and a term that comes up every time we have this discussion from the policing side of the table is these are not necessarily issues of crime. These are issues of social disorder. These are issues of mental health concerns. So I'm wondering if any consideration has been given to, in addition to, in effect, having more boots on the ground in the form of traditional police officers, there's been any consideration to partnering up with some other agencies in the city. I think, for example, of Ottawa Public Health, where there's some synergy, perhaps even an officer whose role is to liaise with the various social agencies like Ottawa Public Health, so that we're not just going out and I appreciate this, I'm keeping this simple, but we're not just going out and putting more officers, making more arrests, but we're dealing more with root cause of the situation. So rather than just stemming the flow, we're trying to stop the flow. So I know, Chief Bell, we've spoken about this very briefly, but I wanted to bring it up in a public context to see if there's any thought towards strengthening that partnership with the social agencies and the public health agencies we have. And as I said, even to have an officer whose role is to make those connections and to see what the synergies are, to see what benefits there are in terms of working in a less traditional policing fashion. So I don't know if that's a question for you, Chief Bell, or the panelists, or how, or maybe a combination.
So actually, I think it's going to be a combination, and I'll start, and I can tell you absolutely Dr. Etches and myself, as well as Donna Gray from Social Services, have already started those discussions, because it's great that we put officers into these neighborhoods, but they're going to start to identify some complex issues that we just can't deal with on our own. So we have begun to have those dialogues. We actually have a model set up in one of our neighborhoods that Inspector Bryden will speak about, which is designed exactly to do that. Bring problems in and look at how we can work together at the systems level to start to resolve those and address those, so the police aren't just continually returning and returning and returning. That's why we've had a lot of focus on what are the outcomes that we have in these neighborhoods relating to the actions that we're taking. So I'll turn it over to Kenny and allow him to give some more examples.
So, great question. And that didn't become more obvious to us when we went through the work of the Vanier problematic addresses when they were identified to us, and we really started to pull apart the layers of the onion, so to speak, and the root causes of a lot of those issues were social disorder issues. So we completely understand that the connections to our service partners, to our social service agencies, is absolutely crucial. We've already started to incorporate those connections and those meetings in our training plan and in meetings as we go forward as we deploy. But a couple of frameworks that are already in piece that I'm going to look to even expand further would be the formalized community networks that are already established, particularly in the Carleton area, as well as merit. In fact, I was at a meeting this afternoon at United Way with respect to merit, but we do have platforms such as those that are already in place that are bringing multi-sector skills and abilities together at a table to identify and address who needs to be speaking to this family, who are best served to help this young individual in whatever the case may be, and maybe should not or doesn't necessarily need to be police. So we do have a number of irons in the fire, if you will. It's going to be incumbent upon me to make sure, and our team to make sure that we do make those connections with all of those partners and those services that we know are out there, and bring them together at the table. And I'm confident that with the training plan we have going forward, the input we've already received from the community, and the frameworks that we already have set up, I think we'll be in a really good spot to build on that.
That's great to hear, and as Chair of Public Health, I can tell you we would welcome those discussions, because, again, we can arrest as many people as we want, but until we really figure out why they're doing what they're doing and get to that, it's going to be like a revolving door. So, again, we would welcome those discussions, and happy to have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Valiquet?
Thank you. I was interested in your list of who you had connected with, who you had consulted with. And I was wondering if the Wabano Centre is going to be, or has been, one of the players in Vanier especially. They represent over 10,000 clients in the area across Ottawa, and I would encourage you to call Alison Fisher and have a discussion about this new program in Vanier, because they would be great to work with. And the centre as well could be a great gathering place if you need, if you have an opportunity there to bring people together. The Wabano Centre is excellent in that regard.
Thank you, Member Valiquet. So yes, we have reached out to Wabano specifically, and actually on that point about providing space and sort of opening up to us, it's absolutely incredible for the vast amount of groups and associations that we have reached out to, community The community has certainly opened up a lot of avenues to help us, and that's just one of them, whether we needed an office or a space to collaborate, to share ideas and whatnot. So it was Francis Daly, is that we have? Okay. We have reached out and we have connected with Wabano. They are very much going to be one of our go-to relationship partners, particularly in the Vanier Overbrook area. Thank you.
Okay, I also saw that you had Timber Creek on your list, and I have previous knowledge of Timber Creek communities. I know that they're very keen to work with Ottawa Police Services. They even have facilities within their grounds that are available for you as well. So that's another very important, I think, and they're so large. They represent so many of our, not our members, but our residents in the community. So that's another good one. And the other one I was wondering about is, I don't see anything listed here, and I'm sure you have made those connections, but the business community. I mean, you're reaching out to resident associations and different organizations, but the BIA in Vanier would be another one to connect with. And certainly the other two sectors I don't think have any BIAs, but to reach out to their business, because they're an important member in all of this as well, right? Because they're the ones that are often targeted.
Completely agree with you. And two other neighborhoods do not have the BIAs like we have in downtown Rideau and Vanier. We have spoken to both associations. I've had a couple of conversations with Ms. Jennings, particularly through during the community policing forum. So we certainly realize just how important businesses, business owners, and those types of properties are to that communication piece. And as I mentioned earlier with residents, councilors, business associations, business owners are most certainly those eyes and ears that we want to tap into as well, and we are doing that. Thank you.
Okay, so in Vanier, it's Nathalie Carrier. She's the executive director of the Vanier BIA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Meehan?
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful rollout. I think people are going to be really happy with it. For other neighborhoods, though, that are seeing an increase in crime, like Riverside South and Finley Creek, they're going to be a little bit disappointed that we don't really have anything for some of these neighborhoods. What I continually hear is, well, we know the break-ins are happening between 1 and 3. As part of this, can we maybe put a police officer on the streets through some of these neighborhoods, just so the police presence? I'm not saying, I mean, we're concentrating on these 3 neighborhoods, I understand that, but there's still a large segment of the city that needs to see increased police presence, especially during what they call the trending hours, where homes and cars are being hit. I know I'm going to get this question as soon as I put this on my website, that we're doing this, but we're not talking about them specifically. So is there a move towards that we can take a look at the time the crime's happening and put an officer there to deter? Especially now that we've got the LRT, like the O train on, we've got bad elements traveling across and through the city. They have transportation and they know where there are not police officers. That's sad to say, but it is happening.
So again, I'll start with that. You're absolutely right that we are starting small.
Yeah.
We do want to grow this as years go ahead. We want to make sure we start small and study it to make sure we do it properly and most efficiently. One of the things that we've seen in the last year or so is that although it's not as efficient as it could, the model we brought in was to see frontline officers engage in those proactive, problem-oriented policing initiatives. And in the last year, we've really seen that pick up. So much of their time and the allocation of time to those problem-oriented policing initiatives now have been in these key areas. And what we'll see is we'll develop some capacity within our front line to take on problems like exist in Riverside South or other neighborhoods across our city. So although there is a concentrated effort in certain neighborhoods, there will be an increased availability of officers when we've identified a problem to take on initiatives in your ward and in other wards where we're seeing lower level crime issues or more targeted crime issues that we can actually start to go after those people. So this is a net benefit to the entire community, so for us to be able to take on those issues.
So what you're saying then, Chief, is these teams are going to have a little bit of flexibility in them, so they can head south, or is
No,
that?
so no, actually, that's not what I'm saying.
No?
These teams will be specifically dedicated to the neighborhoods where they're supposed to
Yeah.
be. And that is the area where they'll be working, building relationships. But right now, when there is only so much time we have to do that problem-oriented policing on the front line, and right now that's dedicated to many of these neighborhoods.
Okay.
That time will be freed up to put into other areas across the city, and that's where you'll see time spent in your neighborhood identifying and working on a specific problem to try and resolve whether it's a crime or social disorder issue.
And so what do I say to the neighborhoods right now?
So you continue to say, as we've discussed, Ottawa, and when continue to report issues, and we work on them, and we continually look to address the crime and social disorder we have in every community. These teams will allow us to have more flexibility in other areas across the city to start to address them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Nerman?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panelists for giving. I have a quick question. I have gone through the team resources, and my question to you is this staffing that you are assigning to these teams will impact the current services in other areas of the police services?
I just want to make sure I understand your question. So the resources that were
To the community.
identified and allotted to the neighborhood resource teams, would they have an impact on,
You are redeploying the resources, possibly from the existing levels. So if once you are redeploying this to the community policing, will it has impact on the current service levels in the other parts of the city or other areas?
well, I don't believe so. And I think that may go back to what Chief Bell was referring to in terms of creating capacity in other sectors by the work that's done in these three neighborhoods.
So I could probably help out there a little. The teams that we're building, each of the teams has 3 net new resources being added to them, so they have no impact. Those are growth resources. Two of the resources on each team are the developmental program that we've actually brought before the board before, so have already been counted away from our frontline resources. So of those 8 resources, 5 resources absolutely do not impact the frontline service delivery that we currently have. What we have looked at doing is realigning the work around our school resource officers, our community police officers, and our traffic officers. But it's important to remember they were already engaged in community policing activities, so the impact on frontline won't occur because this is the work that they were involved in anyways. At the end of the day, when we look at this, it's mostly new resources that are coming on to do this, and we think at the end of the day, this will have a very positive impact on our calls for service and the response to calls for service, specifically in those areas.
Thank you. One follow-up question on the school resource officers. So from which schools you are pulling those resources for these ones?
So we're not pulling them from any schools, and I think that's really important to note. We will continue to maintain services to all schools. What we've done is we've actually gone through a realignment exercise to make sure that the school resource officer that's working in the Vanier area has a group of schools in that actual neighborhood, and that's what will build up their repertoire of schools that they service.
Thank you.
Member Blaustein?
Thank you for this. I have 2 questions, probably relatively short. One, the hours, are they going to be 24/7 in these neighborhoods, or is it going to be Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 kind of thing?
So it will not be 24-hour coverage. It will be a day shift and an afternoon shift, a 1 week of days, followed by 1 week of afternoons. early day shift, and a late day shift start, and then a string of 4 days of afternoon shift from 4 to 2, I believe it was set out to be. So not 24-hour coverage, but a
7 days a
flex
week?
between days and afternoons.
Will it include weekends?
Yes.
Okay, that's question number one, thank you. And the other question I have is also looking at all the resources and organizations and stuff. I'm not seeing anything related to seniors. Seniors are a massively growing population in Ottawa, where dementia, fraud, they're victims of all kinds of things. They're probably our highest number of lost people that we spend tremendous resources looking for. So what are we doing to include the needs and requirements of seniors in these programs?
That's a great question, Member Blaustein, and to be very frank with you, unless my boss here corrects me, that may be an area of the community that I've overlooked. But we are still, like I said, we're still in the middle of our rolling out and developing our training plan. We are always making connections, and we will continue to make connections, new connections every day. And I appreciate that. To be very frank with you, that's something that I did not put my mind to.
I just want to point out also that most seniors, especially when they get into their late 70s, 80s, 90s, are not computer literate. They don't have computers. They don't have internet at home. So a lot of resources have been removed from access to them because they don't have that, and many of them don't drive anymore. So all those factors, I think, really need to be taken into consideration in this plan, because we're all getting there, so.
So again, I just want to thank you for that. But what I do want to sort of put out there and make clear that we do have a training week set out. The community was very much involved in what they wanted to see in that training week. But for me, I see the training continuing on a daily basis, particularly when these men and women get into the neighborhoods and they start pounding the pavement and they start knocking on doors and having coffee and coffee shops and businesses and in people's living rooms. I think it's going to be through those experiences and through those conversations that we're going to learn about parts of our community that, you know, that I didn't necessarily put my mind to for whatever reason. And I'm excited about that part of the training piece, because, like I said, that's going to be something that we develop on a daily basis, and then put in place whatever that particular training gets identified to us as those men and women are in there doing what they need to do in those areas. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Member Valiquet, you had a follow-up?
Thank you. I know that our school resource officers are really overworked at the moment, and I'm just wondering how this new model, how you're going to address that. Are they having to work more hours? How are you realigning their work? How is this going to work? And are you actually backfilling them? Like, are they going to be replaced, or how do you plan on dealing with that one?
So the school resource officers across the city, for that matter, they're not being affected at all in terms of changing a schedule, being removed or added new schools. The big change that I see here is that the school resource officers, particularly for the neighborhoods that we've identified, I really only see this as a win for them. Their schedule is not changing. We are working a hybrid schedule for the first part of this pilot to see just organically with their schedule and the schedule these officers will be working. There is a lot of overlap where they will be working together. The schools and our communities are used to, they appreciate the school resource officers and the community police officers, traffic officers, and the schedules and commitments that they have right now. So I do not see the school resource officers in particular obtaining any new workload. In fact, what I see, and I've said this to the troops, is I really see this as an opportunity for a school resource officer, whether it be through the new neighborhood team or his or her work in the school, to turn to a number of resources that he or she may need to help in any particular school in a very quick, nimble way. So I really don't see the world's being impacted in a negative way. I really only see it as in a positive way to support the work that they are already doing in those schools.
So that means that on a daily basis, your teams are going to get together and you're going to discuss the issues, and depending on where the problems are, you're going to use your team to deploy and to go to those. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how this is going to work, because you've got people in schools, you're going to have people working with the residents. How is your team as such going to work together? Like, can you describe?
Very fair question. So we, again, in the organic overlap of the schedules, there will be frequent meetings between the team where they're all under the same roof, so to speak, and sharing their ideas and thoughts, what they've heard from the schools, what they've heard the community police officer has heard from the community, and vice versa. So it'll be an exercise of prioritization, but there's also the internal avenues that these teams will be receiving work as well through workflow and demands for service and whatnot. But there will be a heavy emphasis on communication, which is a very fair question, absolutely key, so that everybody is on the same page as to what is happening in their neighborhood, whether that's in the school, whether that's in a particular area or park. But those meetings will be very frequent.
As you know, all eyes are on these 3 new pilot projects that you're doing. Everyone's excited about it. We heard from the councillors here today that are very excited about it, so, and the general public is as well. I have just one last question, and it's completely different from what we've just been discussing, but it has to do with Dr. Linda Duxbury and her colleagues. You mentioned that they're engaged and they're going to be conducting an independent evaluation of the neighborhood policing program. This item in particular is of very big interest to me. And I would like, if at all possible, that the report, when it comes back to you, it also comes to the board at the same time, so that we get to look at that independent evaluation when you see it. Because I think that's going to be key on how you're going to either tweak, or you're going to change direction, or you're going to modify something. So I think it's really important for this board, and I don't know how the chair feels about it, and the chief, but I really feel that this is something that you should share with us. When you receive it, we receive it. Is that fair?
So yeah, absolutely. We will continually provide information on the evaluation and as it progresses, and we'll report back to the board on our progress through that. I know there'd been questions in the past about the evaluation, and it was news to us. This is actually an area of a body of work that's never been studied over a longer period of time. So what Dr. Duxbury is going to come in and do is she's going to come in and study social return on investment and financial return on investment to make sure that we're doing the right activities and getting back what we expected out of it. So as we receive that information and make changes and tweaks to the model, we will definitely bring it to the board.
Thank you. And I think you asked if I supported it. I do support that idea, and I think Member Valakay's idea was that it be raw, unfiltered, so that we're getting what the consultants are saying, not your interpretation of it. So we just get the raw comments.
So it will actually be you and the world that will receive it, because it's going to be published information that will be out there. We are not controlling the evaluation or the direction of it, so when it is released, it will be published widely and broadly so people can consume it. So you will get that.
Thank you very much for that, Member Aglai.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up question. Some of the other members have touched on this. So if I recall correctly from the slide, we have the 3 pilot areas, and then as budget allows, we will add to that. For the communities that are not within the 3, will we continue to see the current model in place? So I think I've got Constable Jordan, for example. So we would continue to have that relationship with our existing community policing officers until the eventual switchover?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that.
Does anybody have any other questions on this? No. So I think you can see from a board standpoint just how engaged and interested everybody is. And as I said earlier, this is something that really came back to us as a real key priority. So I really appreciate the presentation. And is that received by the board? Thank you very much. So thank you for that presentation. So now we're going to other business. And is there any other business? I would like to once again thank the Algonquin students. I hope this was informative for you and that you learned something, and just mention that please feel free to reach out to either committee members or police if you have any follow-up or you're interested or want to know more about policing. So thank you very much, and I'd like a consideration of a motion to move in camera. Have that? Okay. Carried. Good, thank you.